Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, the link in the description below. Today, reports have come out that a Chinese Type 94 submarine has ended up being ensnared in one of its own traps, and 55 crew members died as a result of the incident. It is one of the largest submarine disasters to have occurred recently, outside of the Kilo-class submarine Rostov-on-Don being destroyed inside of its dry dock at Sevastopol, but this is certainly a very interesting incident that has actually had its roots at the very later part of August, around the 21st of August. British drones and semi-submersibles have been used for some time, along with other Western semi-submersibles surveillance equipment, to try and gather more information about Chinese naval bases along their main coastline, and specifically inside of the Yellow Sea area, where a large part of the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy vessels are currently stationed at. Of course, there are more outside of this area. There are major naval bases near every major city, port city, that is along China's coast, but a decent amount of these ports are also found within the Yellow Sea, which borders the Korean Peninsula and the mainland of China, close to Beijing, and heading all the way down towards the area of Shanghai. The Chinese have been trying to thwart these surveillance attempts by Western countries, such as the British, by laying out traps inside of the Yellow Sea that will hopefully catch these semi-submersibles and either destroy them or impede their ability to try and surveil what the Chinese naval bases are currently up to at the moment. Interestingly enough, this has appeared to have led to a disaster, as a Type 94 submarine of an unknown name — here is a picture of one of the Type 94 submarines of the People's Liberation Army Navy — ended up getting caught inside of one of these traps and stuck. The resulting incident was actually very detailed and descriptive from what we can understand from British intelligence, and I'll be taking y'all to that here in a moment. But before we do, let's go over a little bit of the public information that we know about the Type 94 ballistic missile submarines. First, we know that the submarines cost around $750 million per unit. These submarines are also called the Gen class by their NATO designation, and there is only 6 of these in service with the People's Liberation Army Navy. They are some of the larger submarines in their fleet and are currently anticipated to be replaced with the Type 96 submarine, which we have not really gotten a lot of pictures or information about yet, and we also haven't seen many of those pushed into service, if any at all. We do know, however, that this is one of the Chinese premier submarines being introduced, the first of its kind, around the year 2007, and serving up until the present day. But moving on from some basic information about its cost, where it comes from when it went into service, this submarine is a nuclear-powered submarine. It also is 450 feet long, being one of the longer submarines in the world, and also having a crew of 140. Now, moving on to the official report by the British, here is what we've heard according to Clash Report on Twitter. 55 Chinese sailors are feared dead after their nuclear submarine apparently got caught in a trap intended to ensnare British subsurface vessels in the Yellow Sea. According to a secret UK report, the seamen died following a catastrophic failure of the submarine's oxygen systems, which poisoned the crew. The captain of the Chinese PLA submarine 093417 is understood to be among the deceased, as are 21 other officers. Officially, China has denied the incident took place. It also appears Beijing refused to request international assistance for its stricken vessel. The UK reported into the fatal mission reads, intelligence reports that on the 21st of August, there was an onboard accident whilst carrying out a mission in the Yellow Sea. The incident happened at 8:12 in the morning, local time, resulting in the death of 55 crew members, including 22 officers, 7 officer cadets, 9 petty officers, and 17 sailors. Dead include the captain, Colonel Zhui Yongpeng. Our understanding is death caused by hypoxia due to the system fault on the submarine. The submarine hit a chain and anchor obstacle used by the Chinese Navy to trap U.S. and Allied submarines. This resulted in systems failures that took 6 hours to repair and to service the vessel. The onboard oxygen system, then faulty, poisoned the crew after a catastrophic failure. There are a couple of things that we can get from this report here that tell us exactly what happened to the submarine. First, we can hear that it hit some kind of a chain and anchor obstacle under the sea. These are actually fairly normal obstacles to be laid out in anti-submarine warfare, but one thing that is particularly interesting is that the submarine collided into it, showing that there may have been a navigational error on the part of one of the navigators in the submarine, and they were not able to account for the chain and anchor that had been laid out in this area. Or it may have been that the People's Liberation Army Navy had a communications breakdown, and the deployment of this chain and anchor was never mentioned to the submarine crew and was never highlighted on Chinese naval maps for submarines and other vessels to avoid. Another interesting thing that we're hearing is that the casualty report, from what we understand, is very officer heavy compared to all of the crew members that were killed. Out of a complement of 140 crew members, 22 officers, 7 officer cadets, and 9 petty officers died, and only 17 enlisted sailors were killed in this accident. And this tells us that this attack had to have been, well, not this attack, I'm sorry, correction there. This incident with the oxygen system poisoning the crew must have been fairly localized towards a command center of the ship. For example, the bridge is most likely a very likely place, considering the high concentration of officers that were killed, considering that the captain, Colonel Zhui Yongping, was also killed as well. That may be indicating that all of these officers were present on the bridge, and this may have been the bridge crew and the surrounding chambers or bulkheads in the submarine that were poisoned and killed by the oxygen system. So we don't know much more than that. This is currently the only information that we have right now on this PLA submarine, but nevertheless, it is showing that there is some kind of an incompetency plaguing the Chinese Navy and specifically the submarine forces for such an incident to happen and for such a serious loss of life to occur. Out of 140 crew members, over 30% of them died in this incident. And that is a fairly interesting thing to note, and once again showing that the Chinese Navy, while large, may have some major obstacles to overcome as far as their competency is concerned, especially with this incident in mind. Moving on from that, however, we've also heard that inside of Serbia, there appears to be a plan to annex northern Kosovo by the Serbs. This was published today by Global Military Info, and also is quoting a large part of the Kosovan statements made about the current situation. Kosovo announced that Serbia had a larger plan to annex the north of Kosovo, and are currently investigating possible Russian involvement in the recent incident. And this is a fairly interesting statement on its own, considering that Kosovo is announcing that the Serbs plan on annexing a large part of northern Serbia, which would be this area right here. That is incredibly interesting. I have a feeling that it probably includes the major city of Mitrovica, or Mitrovica, if I'm saying that correctly. And that may be indicating that the Serbs are going to, instead of trying to take Kosovo in one giant piece, chip away at it. This is also something that goes completely against our current force deployment map that we had seen days before, showing where all 3 of the Serbian brigades' forward operating bases have been placed along the border. We can actually see that a majority of them are not in the northern area of Kosovo. They are in fact in the southeastern area and the direct east area of Kosovo's borders, and it appears that they would be going on assault lanes down the major highways towards the capital city of Pristina, and hopefully, by the Serbs' mindset, forcing the Kosovans into some kind of a negotiated peace where concessions could be made, for example, possibly giving up northern Kosovo. But the Kosovans in any potential war will not be taking the northern area, most likely. Instead, they'll be taking the southeast and eastern areas of Kosovo instead, based off of their force deployment locations. Moving on to the next statement that was made, KFOR currently has 4,500 troops stationed in Kosovo, with an additional 200 being deployed from the UK. KFOR forces are largely NATO forces that are being moved into the area to try and ensure the security of Kosovan independence that was once again assured by by NATO as an alliance way back in the mid-90s during the ethnic cleansing that the Serbs were conducting on the Kosovans, which of course led to the existence of Kosovo at all. We'll be possibly seeing that these forces are the main drawback to the Serbs starting a war. The Serbs, of course, largely don't want to get NATO involvement in the situation. NATO, back in the day, was very relentless in trying to crush the Serbian forces that were cleansing the Kosovans from the area, and this will most likely be a major detractor for any forces attempting anything currently. Serbia withdrew some of their troops that were forward deployed near the border with Kosovo. Serbia had deployed around 8,350 troops, but reduced the level to 4,500, according to the chief of the General Staff of the Serbian Armed Forces. And while this is a significant reduction, that is still well, actually, correction there, that would be about 1.5 brigades that are still left in this area. Still a sizable number, but not as large as the ones we got a little while earlier when we got the force deployment map a few days ago. The chief of the general staff of the Serbian armed forces did state that if they were ordered to enter Kosovo, they would do it efficiently and successfully. Serbia has not raised their level of awareness, and the U.S. is working to verify the withdrawal of forces. And so we can see that the situation is, of course, very tense. The Kosovans are very concerned still. NATO is on standby just in case if anything happens. And, of course, everyone is largely on edge within Serbia. Romania is also contributing their part to the KFOR forces within Kosovo, as they'll be sending their own forces, according to OSINT Defender, into the region of Kosovo to help out with the rising tensions. Romania, being a NATO member, means that their forces will be transferred to the overall allied commander of the coalition forces for KFOR that are inside of Kosovo. We don't know who that leader is currently while we're making this news. Meanwhile, inside of Ukraine, we've also heard that a Russian counterattack, or a Russian offensive, that was conducted just south of Marinka today has ended in disaster after their battalion tactical group appears to have taken very significant losses, maybe even catastrophic losses, within the course of a few hours. From what we understand, and moving into the general area of Marinka, it appears that this Russian battalion tactical group today was advancing here in between the fields of Novomikhailivka and also Marinka, and hoping to punch through Ukrainian lines south of Pobieda and start moving towards Hyorivka or Maximilianivka. Sorry everyone, I'm butchering that terribly. But this battalion tactical group advanced forward, and I'm thinking that it was not expecting any heavy resistance, because the amount of vehicular losses and troop losses that we heard today were very large, considering that only one battalion tactical group was involved in this offensive operation. From what we heard, the attack failed outright, practically as soon as it started, with 4 T-72B3s being destroyed and a BMP-2. As far as the battalion tactical group goes, this means that 40% of its tank forces have been destroyed, and around 1%, or more so 3%, of their BMP-2 forces have been completely destroyed as well, or their armored personnel carrier forces. We currently don't have an exact count on the infantry losses for the Russian battalion tactical group in this offensive, but we did get further pictures confirming the significant losses of Russian armor and tanks in the field. You can see them all right here, showing that this attack was an abysmal failure as far as this Russian battalion tactical group was concerned, and it appears that the Ukrainian defenders were far stronger than this area than the Russians expected. We can also understand that Russian training is incredibly poor still, and it is certainly showing in their execution of offensive doctrines. Based off of what we've been seeing throughout the war, many analysts and generals in Western militaries have stated that due to the poor training of Russian forces, further offensive operations by the Russian army on a larger level beyond the regiment will most likely not be possible. And we can see that now down to the battalion tactical group level, it seems to not be possible either. It was a very poorly executed offensive by just a battalion tactical group, which is one of the most basic elements of the Russian army. And it took so many losses to gain absolutely nothing that this may be one of the wake-up calls that the Russians are looking at to see that their troops are so heavily inexperienced that further offensive operations in Ukraine, regardless of exterior circumstances, may not be possible beyond this point. But with that, that's all of the major news we have today. I got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It makes us very happy when y'all do. And also, if you hit the bell button, you'll be notified of when we put out these breaking news videos, as well as our nightly war streams, which happen at 10 p.m. Eastern every night but Monday. Of course, make sure to also click on the link in the description below and go support us on Patreon. That helps us to keep making these video projects possible. And I gotta thank you all so much once again for a little bit of y'all's time to hear about some of the major breaking news around the world today. But with that, I will see you all in the next one. Take care.